What if I told you the very thing you fear most could become your greatest source of power? Have you ever noticed how rejection seems to control almost every decision you make? From the romantic partner you don't approach to the promotion you don't ask for. That hesitation, that moment of pause before you take a risk, that's the invisible chain of rejection wrapping itself around your potential. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching. From today, it's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Has this ever happened to you? You're sitting in a meeting with a brilliant idea that could transform your company, but the words catch in your throat. The fear of colleagues dismissing your thoughts paralyzes you, and you watch as someone else voices a similar concept. Minutes later to widespread acclaim. Or perhaps you've spotted someone across the room, felt that magnetic pull, but never approached them because the possibility of a no felt more devastating than the potential of a lifetime of yes. What Machiavelli understood centuries ago, and what the most powerful people in our world instinctively know, is that rejection isn't the enemy we perceive it to be. In fact, it might be the most underutilized weapon in your arsenal for success, influence, and personal freedom. The Prince of Strategic Thinking would tell you that those invisible chains aren't actually restraining you. They're restraining everyone else, and therein lies your advantage. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might fundamentally change how you interact with every person you meet from this day forward. The most influential people in history, from visionary CEOs to revolutionary leaders, don't avoid rejection. They actively seek it out. They understand that each no builds psychological immunity that the average person never develops. Think about it. Your brain processes rejection the same way it processes physical pain. When someone says no to you, the same neural pathways activate as when you experience bodily harm. This isn't weakness, it's biology. But while most people spend their lives avoiding this discomfort at all costs, the truly powerful understand that this pain is actually strength training for your psychological resilience. The consequences of fearing rejection extend far beyond missed opportunities. It makes you fundamentally weak, easily manipulated, and ultimately forgettable. You begin living your life according to what others might approve, watering down your opinions, shrinking your dreams, and playing it safe until you become practically invisible. And the painful irony, this desperate attempt to avoid rejection actually makes you more likely to be rejected. What if there was another way? What if instead of running from rejection, you could transform it into your most powerful tool for success? What if Machiavelli's centuries-old wisdom could be applied to modern life in ways that would make you untouchable, unforgettable, and unstoppable? If you're ready to master rejection and transform it into your greatest power, subscribe to the channel. I share powerful psychological insights that most people will never discover, giving you an edge in every area of life. The secret lies in understanding that rejection isn't a verdict on your worth. It's merely information, and the true revelation is how deeply this fear is wired into your biology. When someone rejects you, your brain doesn't distinguish between this social wound and actual physical harm. Neuroscientists have discovered a hidden truth about our cognitive architecture. The anterior cingulate cortex, the same region that lights up when you're physically injured, activates intensely during moments of rejection. Your mind literally processes a dismissive comment from a colleague, a swipe left on a dating app, or a declined proposal as if someone had struck you. This isn't just psychological, it's physiological. Brain scans reveal this remarkable pattern with startling clarity. The impact of hearing no triggers the same neural pathways as actual bodily pain, creating a similar cascade of stress hormones and emotional distress. This explains the profound discomfort we feel when facing potential rejection, that tightening in your chest before asking for a raise, or the dry mouth when approaching someone attractive. But this mindset originated for good reason. Your ancient ancestors lived in small, interdependent tribes where exile meant almost certain death. Being cast out from your social group would leave you vulnerable to predators, starvation, and the harsh elements. Rejection wasn't just uncomfortable, it was potentially fatal. This evolutionary programming served a crucial purpose. In that environment, those who feared rejection survived by maintaining tribal bonds, while those who didn't risked deadly isolation. Your fear of rejection is literally the echo of your ancestors' survival mechanism, passed down through generations as a biological inheritance. The tragedy is that this ancient alarm system now hijacks your modern decision-making process in environments where rejection poses no actual survival threat. Your brain still treats a declined invitation or criticism of your ideas as life-threatening, triggering fight-or-flight responses completely disproportionate to the situation. This primitive programming sabotages your career advancement, relationship development, and personal growth journey. Most people never realize how this evolutionary hangover shapes their every interaction. They allow this outdated survival mechanism to dictate their choices, keeping them imprisoned by fears that no longer serve them. But awareness of this biological reality is the first step in your transformation. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by examining how this rejection programming manifests in your daily life. The ways this primitive fear response limits your potential are more extensive than most realize, affecting everything from your professional ambitions to your deepest relationships. Drop in the comments, "I'm breaking my rejection chains," if you've recognized how this ancient programming has been holding you back in your own life. Let's look at how this biological programming has been silently orchestrating the symphony of your life. Think about the pivotal moments where you've hesitated, that dream job application you never submitted, the person you were drawn to but never approached, the business idea you abandoned before it breathed its first breath. Behind each of these aborted possibilities stands the same shadow, the fear of rejection. What's truly fascinating about this mindset transformation is recognizing that fear doesn't just influence your decisions, it fundamentally reshapes your entire decision-making architecture. You've been conditioned to view rejection as the ultimate failure, but this perspective creates a profound power reversal in your life. When you organize your actions around avoiding rejection, you unknowingly hand the controls of your life to others. Your choices become painfully predictable, your behaviors easily manipulated, and your potential severely constrained. The hidden truth is that those who master social dynamics understand this vulnerability intimately. They recognize how rejection-avoidant people become pawns in larger games of influence. Your fear creates a blueprint of your boundaries that others can exploit with remarkable precision. Those unbound by this fear aren't just freer, they're playing an entirely different game, one where they establish the rules instead of following them. Perhaps most devastating is the journey of self-erasure that rejection fear initiates. Your authentic voice begins to dissolve, replaced by a carefully calibrated echo of what you believe others want to hear. You witness yourself diluting your opinions until they're bland enough to offend no one. You find yourself shrinking your dreams to fit within other people's comfort zones, and you play it increasingly safe until you become practically invisible, a pale shadow of what you could be. This invisible metamorphosis happens so gradually that most never recognize the transformation, until they can barely remember what authentic self-expression felt like. The tragedy isn't just personal, it's exactly what power structures want. Systems of control thrive on predictable, compliant individuals who self-censor before ever being censored. Your fear does their work for them. Behind the scenes of every interaction, you're making unconscious calculations. Will this statement risk disapproval? Could this action invite criticism? Might this choice lead to rejection? Each mental computation pushes you further from your core truth and deeper into a choreographed performance designed to minimize the risk of hearing no. The revelation that most never grasp is that this performance doesn't even work. When you organize your existence around avoiding rejection, you paradoxically become more likely to experience it. There's an unmistakable energy to neediness that repels the very acceptance you seek. Let's now examine what happens in the minds of those who've broken this pattern, the rare individuals who've discovered that indifference to rejection is actually their greatest source of magnetic attraction. Drop in the comments. Freedom awaits. If you're ready to break the invisible chains of rejection fear that have been silently directing your life's most important decisions. The most striking revelation in this journey is what I call the rejection paradox, a cruel irony that shapes social dynamics in ways few recognize. The more intensely you fear rejection, the more frequently you experience it. This isn't just psychological projection, it's a tangible energy that emanates from you. Desperation has a distinctive aura that others can detect almost immediately, even before you've spoken a single word. There's a hidden truth operating beneath conscious awareness in every human interaction. Neediness is fundamentally repulsive to others. It creates an instinctive aversion that people can't quite articulate but powerfully feel. When your mental landscape is dominated by thoughts like, please accept me or don't reject me, that energy seeps into your body language, vocal tonality, and decision-making in ways you can't consciously control. Consider this mindset transformation by reflecting on the people you genuinely respect in your life. Do they frantically seek validation? Do they morph their personality to please whoever's in the room? Do they seem desperate for approval? Of course not. The individuals who command authentic respect appear remarkably unbothered by whether others accept them. They possess an almost magnetic quality precisely because they don't seem to need your magnetism. Their independence isn't just refreshing, it's compelling. When someone's self-worth isn't contingent on your opinion of them, you paradoxically value their opinion of you much more. This creates a complete power inversion in social dynamics that most never grasp. The person who needs validation the least receives it the most, while those who desperately seek it find it perpetually out of reach. Join our growing community of rejection masters by hitting that subscribe button now. Unlike the masses who remain trapped by fear, you'll gain exclusive strategies to build unstoppable confidence in business, relationships, and life. This phenomenon creates a devastating cycle that traps millions in a lifetime pattern of emotional scarcity. You fear rejection, which manifests as subtle neediness. This neediness repels others, leading to more rejection. Each rejection intensifies your fear, making you even more desperate for acceptance, which further increases rejection. The spiral tightens with each turn, creating an almost inescapable pattern that shapes your entire social landscape. Meanwhile, in stark contrast, those who've broken this cycle experience an entirely different reality. They ask for what they want without emotional attachment to the outcome. They express their authentic thoughts without anxiously monitoring for disapproval. They pursue ambitious goals without being crippled by potential failure. The difference isn't that they never face rejection, it's that rejection doesn't control them. The watershed moment in personal development comes when you realize rejection isn't happening to you, it's happening for you. Each instance becomes valuable data rather than emotional devastation. This perspective shift represents the ultimate psychological liberty, freedom from the invisible prison that confines most people's potential. But this liberation requires understanding what Machiavelli recognized centuries ago about the fundamental nature of power and influence in human relationships. Leave a comment with "power shift activated" if you've recognized this destructive cycle in your own life and are ready to break free from its constraints. Machiavelli's insights on rejection reveal a perspective so radical that most find it disturbing, yet history repeatedly validates its truth. In The Prince, he observed something profound about human nature. A person who fears rejection will never command genuine respect or wield true power. This revelation stands in direct opposition to our social conditioning, but its wisdom is undeniable when you examine it closely. His fundamental breakthrough was recognizing that effective leaders cannot afford the luxury of being universally loved. In fact, and this is where his genius becomes apparent, he discovered that actively trying to please everyone is the fastest, most direct path to losing your power entirely. When you desperately seek validation from all quarters, you become manipulable by all quarters. Your decision-making becomes paralyzed by the impossible task of satisfying contradictory demands. This insight led to perhaps his most notorious observation. Since love and fear can hardly exist together, if we must choose between them, it is far safer to be feared than loved. While this sounds harsh to modern sensibilities, the psychological truth beneath it remains unchanged. To maintain your personal power, you must be willing to face criticism, hostility, and outright dismissal. You must be prepared for others to reject your ideas, your decisions, and sometimes even you personally. The watershed moment in your personal evolution comes when you realize this isn't cruel, it's clarifying. It liberates you from the impossible burden of universal approval. When you examine history's most transformative figures, you discover they all embodied this principle, whether consciously or intuitively. Caesar knew the Roman Senate might reject him, indeed, might declare him an enemy of the state. When he crossed the Rubicon with his army, he proceeded anyway, forever altering the course of Western civilization. Steve Jobs faced the ultimate rejection when ousted from Apple, the company he founded, by his own board of directors. He returned years later to build it into one of history's most valuable enterprises. Gandhi faced rejection from both British authorities and traditional Indian leaders when pursuing independence through non-violence. What did these radically different individuals share in common? They understood that rejection isn't a final verdict on your worth, it's merely information to incorporate into your journey. They recognize that opposition often signals you're disrupting entrenched interests or challenging comfortable assumptions. The revelation that ties these historical figures together is their willingness to walk straight into rejection rather than organizing their lives around avoiding it. Their resilience wasn't built on never experiencing rejection. It came from transforming their relationship with rejection entirely. When you're not afraid of no, people suddenly lose their ability to control you through its threat. When you don't need approval to proceed, you gain a freedom of action that the approval-dependent can never access. This insight illuminates the critical difference between confidence and arrogance. The arrogant person desperately needs validation, but pretends otherwise. The confident person has fundamentally transcended the need for external validation altogether. Leave a comment with "freedom through rejection" if you've experienced how letting go of approval-seeking has paradoxically earned you more respect from others. What sets these transformative figures apart from ordinary leaders isn't just their accomplishments. It's their fundamental approach to authenticity. They didn't organize their lives around avoiding rejection. They walked directly into it, making bold moves while fully aware they would face criticism, opposition, and potential failure. This willingness to confront rejection head-on made them essentially untouchable and impossible to control through social pressure. Examine how this manifests in your everyday reality. When someone threatens to withdraw their approval, unless you comply with their expectations, what happens? The person desperate for acceptance immediately conforms. The person who has transcended this need remains unmoved. This profound difference in response represents a decisive shift in who truly holds power in the relationship. Machiavelli captured this distinction perfectly. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. This insight reveals the fundamental division in humanity between performers and authentic beings. Someone trapped in rejection fear exists in a perpetual state of performance, constantly adapting their persona to match what they believe others want. They become walking reflections of external expectations rather than expressions of internal truth. The person who has embraced rejection, however, reveals their genuine power. They've shed the exhausting burden of maintaining appearances and discovered something revolutionary. Authenticity is magnetic. When you stop performing and start being, you access a wellspring of charisma that the rejection avoidant can never tap into. Your words carry weight because they come from conviction rather than calculation. This mindset transformation leads to perhaps the most counterintuitive revelation in the psychology of influence. Rejection isn't just something to overcome, it's something to weaponize. Most view rejection as proof of inadequacy, evidence they're not enough in some fundamental way. But this perspective is completely backward when examined through Machiavelli's lens. Rejection is actually evidence of strength, not weakness. Consider this hidden truth. Who faces rejection more frequently? The person playing it safe or the one taking bold risks? The follower or the leader? The permission seeker or the action taker? The revolutionary insight is that successful people encounter rejection constantly precisely because they're attempting things that intimidate others. They're making audacious moves that threaten established systems. They're refusing to stay in prescribed lanes. Every visionary entrepreneur faces rejection from investors. Every revolutionary leader faces rejection from the establishment. Every groundbreaking artist faces rejection from critics. Every innovative thinker faces rejection from traditionalists. This isn't coincidence, it's causation. The scale of your vision determines the scale of opposition you'll encounter. What if, instead of viewing rejection as something to avoid, you recognized it as confirmation you're disrupting comfort zones and challenging the status quo? What if each no became evidence you're playing at a level that makes mediocre minds uncomfortable? Let's explore how this paradigm shift transforms rejection from a source of pain into a source of power, and how you can apply this in your daily journey toward influence. Type "Rejection is my compass" in the comments if you've realized that the things most worth pursuing are often guarded by the greatest resistance. This insight forces us to confront an uncomfortable question. Who faces more rejection in life? Is it the person who plays it safe, following established paths and asking for permission at every turn? Or is it the visionary who takes calculated risks, leads rather than follows, and acts rather than seeks approval? The answer reveals a profound paradox at the heart of success. The most accomplished people in any field face rejection at a scale that would paralyze the average person. The entrepreneur behind $1 billion company likely heard no from dozens of investors before finding one who believed in their vision. The best-selling author probably accumulated enough rejection letters to wallpaper a room before landing their first publishing deal. The revolutionary leader faced dismissal, mockery, and outright hostility before their ideas gained acceptance. This pattern isn't coincidental, it's causal. These individuals experience rejection with greater frequency precisely because they're attempting endeavors that frighten ordinary minds. They're pursuing visions beyond conventional imagination. They're questioning assumptions that others accept without thought. They're disturbing comfortable patterns that most prefer to maintain. In this light, rejection becomes not just tolerable, but actively valuable, a signpost indicating you're challenging the status quo. When you encounter resistance, it often means you're pushing against established systems that resist change by design. The breakthrough realization is that rejection doesn't signal your inadequacy. It confirms you're making moves substantial enough to threaten existing power structures. Those who consistently play it safe almost never achieve extraordinary outcomes, because transformative success requires disrupting entrenched patterns. The truly successful recognize this dynamic and develop what psychologists call the desensitization principle. They intentionally expose themselves to rejection until its emotional impact diminishes. Consider rejection as emotional weight training. Each no you receive, each dismissal you endure, each criticism you face, they all function as resistance that strengthens your psychological muscles. The first rejection in any domain feels crushing, just as the first time you attempt a heavy deadlift feels impossible. But with consistent exposure, your capacity expands. The weight that once seemed unbearable becomes manageable. The rejection that once seemed devastating becomes merely informative. This transformation doesn't just make you more resilient, it makes you more powerful. When you've heard no 100 times and continued forward, you develop a fearlessness that others sense immediately. This fearlessness translates directly into persuasive ability. The person who isn't desperate for agreement speaks with a conviction that the approval seeker can never access. Think about conversations you've had with someone who seemed completely unbothered by potential disagreement. There's a magnetic quality to their certainty, isn't there? They don't need your validation, which paradoxically makes you value their perspective more highly. This isn't manipulation. It's authentic confidence, born from repeated exposure to rejection. The revelation here is that your relationship with rejection directly determines your capacity for influence. The more you've faced rejection and continued forward, the less power it holds over your decisions. Drop stronger through resistance in the comments if you've experienced how facing rejection has built your resilience in ways that avoiding it never could. Most people approach this emotional training backwards. They actively avoid situations where rejection might occur, staying safely within comfort zones where approval is virtually guaranteed. While this strategy prevents short-term discomfort, it creates devastating long-term vulnerability. Like an athlete who never trains with weights, they remain weak precisely in the areas most crucial for real-world success. The illuminating contrast comes from those rare individuals who deliberately seek out rejection. They apply for positions slightly beyond their qualifications. They approach people who might say no. They share ideas that might face criticism. Through this consistent exposure, they develop something invaluable: psychological immunity. They've been rejected so frequently that rejection itself loses its emotional grip over them. The experience that paralyzes others becomes merely another data point in their journey. This immunity represents true inner freedom. When no longer devastates you, you gain access to opportunities, connections, and experiences that remain invisible to those constrained by rejection fear. Your decision-making transforms from what will prevent rejection to what will create the best outcome, an entirely different framework that produces dramatically different results. But the real revelation emerges in what psychologists call the reversal effect. When you demonstrate genuine indifference to rejection, not as a performance but as an authentic state, something remarkable happens in your social dynamics. People begin actively seeking your approval instead. This isn't manipulation, it's a fundamental principle of human psychology operating beneath conscious awareness. The mechanism works in reverse of what intuition suggests. When you desperately need validation from others, they instinctively withdraw it. When you appear completely unconcerned with whether they accept you, they become almost obsessed with earning your approval. This creates a complete inversion of the typical power structure in relationships of all kinds. You can witness this principle in action at any social gathering. Who's the most magnetic person in the room? Is it the individual frantically trying to impress everyone, carefully monitoring reactions and adjusting behavior accordingly? Or is it the person who seems perfectly content, regardless of others' opinions, someone enjoying themselves without constantly scanning for approval cues? The answer is obvious when framed this way. We're instinctively drawn to those who don't seem to need us. Their self-sufficiency creates curiosity about what makes them so complete. Their independence from external validation suggests they possess something internally valuable that we might want to discover. This dynamic explains why desperate attempts at attraction consistently backfire, while genuine self-assurance creates almost magnetic pull. The needy person repels precisely what they seek, while the self-contained individual attracts it without actively pursuing it. The transformation begins when you recognize that rejection resistance isn't about developing thick skin or becoming emotionally callous. It's about fundamentally redefining what rejection means to you, shifting from a verdict on your worth to simply information about fit and alignment. Let's explore how this redefinition creates practical power in everyday interactions and how you can systematically build this immunity through specific practices rather than vague mindset shifts. Share magnetic indifference in the comments if you've noticed how your need for approval directly correlates with how difficult it is to obtain. What makes this psychological principle so powerful is its universal application across every domain where influence matters. In business negotiations, the person willing to walk away from the deal always maintains leverage. In leadership scenarios, the executive who doesn't need consensus to make decisions commands more respect than the one constantly seeking approval. In personal relationships, the individual who maintains healthy boundaries attracts stronger connections than the one who compromises essential values for acceptance. This isn't manipulation. It's a fundamental axiom of human interaction. We instinctively value what isn't freely given to everyone. Consider how exclusive restaurants maintain prestige precisely because they're selective about who they serve, or how limited edition products create demand through scarcity. This same dynamic operates in human relationships at every level, from boardrooms to bedrooms. When you're not afraid of losing someone's approval, you suddenly become worth having. Your time becomes valuable because it's not automatically available to anyone who asks. Your attention becomes meaningful because it's selectively granted. Your validation carries weight because it's earned rather than freely distributed. This creates the most profound shift in social dynamics. Instead of positioning yourself as the pursuer, you become the prize others chase. The entire power structure reverses. Rather than you working to prove your worth to them, they begin working to demonstrate their value to you. Instead of you anxiously seeking their acceptance, they actively pursue your approval. The revelation that few grasp is that this transformation doesn't require extraordinary talent, exceptional looks, or unusual intelligence. It requires only a changed relationship with rejection. When you no longer organize your actions around avoiding no, you access a form of social power that remains invisible to those still trapped in approval-seeking patterns. Machiavelli captured this dynamic with characteristic insight. Men judge, generally more by the eye than by the hand, for everyone can see and few can feel. His meaning? People judge you primarily by how you appear to handle rejection, not by whether you actually experience it. When rejection doesn't visibly impact you, when you maintain the same confident demeanor, decisive action, and clear boundaries regardless of others' responses, people automatically assume you possess something they don't. This perception creates a fascinating cascade of assumptions. They assume you have other options. They assume you've already achieved significant success. They assume you've developed inner resources that make external validation unnecessary. Most importantly, they assume you know something about your own value that they haven't yet recognized. Often these assumptions become self-fulfilling prophecies. When people believe you have options, they offer you more. When they think you've achieved success, they present new opportunities. When they sense your self-sufficiency, they offer connection. What begins as perception transforms into reality through the alchemy of social dynamics. The journey to this state begins with a fundamental insight. Your fear of rejection has been misidentified as humility when it's actually the most subtle form of ego protection. True confidence isn't the absence of rejection, it's the transformed relationship with it. Let's explore the practical applications of rejection immunity through specific techniques that translate this psychological framework into everyday power. Type "perception creates reality" in the comments if you've witnessed how people's assumptions about your confidence level directly affected how they responded to you. The impact of rejection immunity extends beyond just social interactions. It fundamentally transforms how others perceive your inherent value. Someone who appears unaffected by rejection triggers a fascinating cognitive response in observers. They begin wondering what special knowledge, unique perspective, or inner security you possess that makes you so resilient. This curiosity isn't superficial. It creates a genuine attraction to your presence and perspectives. Watch how this psychological cascade unfolds. Curiosity about your rejection immunity naturally evolves into attraction. Attraction develops into influence, and influence ultimately manifests as power. This progression occurs not because you've manipulated anyone, but because you've displayed a quality so rare that it commands attention and respect without demanding it. Behind the scenes of every human interaction, people are constantly assessing each other's relationship with external validation. When they encounter someone seemingly liberated from approval seeking, it creates a cognitive disruption that reframes how they position themselves relative to you. Your perceived immunity becomes a form of social capital that few understand how to cultivate. Now here's the revelation that most people miss entirely. You don't need to be completely immune to rejection to access this power dynamic. You simply need to appear immune to it. The critical transformation happens not in whether you feel the sting of rejection, most people do, but in whether you allow that sting to visibly control your behavior and decisions. Even the most confident people experience moments of disappointment when facing rejection. The difference is that they've mastered keeping this emotional response internal rather than letting it manifest externally. They feel the impact but choose a response that preserves their dignity and maintains their trajectory rather than one that broadcasts vulnerability. This distinction isn't about suppressing authentic emotions or creating a false persona. It's about developing what psychologists identify as emotional regulation, perhaps the most undervalued power tool in human interaction. You fully experience the emotion, acknowledge it internally, then deliberately choose your response rather than reacting automatically from the emotion itself. Consider the stark contrast in how rejection affects different people. Most function as emotional slaves. They feel rejected, so they act desperate. They feel dismissed, so they seek attention. They feel criticized, so they defensively change themselves. Their emotional state directly dictates their behavioral response with almost no intervention between stimulus and reaction. Powerful individuals experience the identical emotions but choose entirely different responses. They feel rejected and shrug it off as the other person's limitation. They feel dismissed and double down on their position with calm certainty. They feel criticized and use it as valuable data to refine their approach rather than as a reason to abandon their path. This mastery of the gap between emotion and response represents the fundamental difference between those controlled by external validation and those who maintain internal sovereignty regardless of outside opinions. The emotion itself isn't the problem, it's the automatic behavioral pattern that typically follows it. Let's examine how this principle translates into practical techniques that allow you to maintain composure even when facing direct rejection, criticism, or dismissal, and how this composure becomes your greatest asset in influencing others. Drop "Master of my responses" in the comments if you've experienced how choosing your reaction to rejection rather than automatically following emotional impulses has changed the outcome of important situations in your life. Let's turn these psychological insights into practical strategies that transform your relationship with rejection forever. The first rule represents a complete reversal of conventional thinking. Expect rejection, never beg acceptance. Most people approach every interaction hoping for approval and feeling devastated when they encounter resistance. This mindset creates perpetual vulnerability. The revolutionary approach flips this entirely. Expect the no, plan for it, prepare your response to it. When rejection becomes your baseline expectation rather than your feared outcome, something remarkable happens to your psychological state. You're never disappointed and occasionally pleasantly surprised. This expectation fundamentally changes your demeanor from anxious to assured. This mental framework creates a profound shift in how you approach requests. Observe how most people ask for things. They hedge their language, apologize in advance for the imposition, and provide easy exit routes before the other person even responds. I don't know if you'd be interested, but maybe if you have time and it's not too much trouble. This approach practically guarantees rejection because it broadcasts your lack of conviction in what you're requesting. The subliminal message is clear. I don't actually believe this is worth your time. Why would anyone value something when the person proposing it seems unconvinced of its merit? Instead, the Machiavellian approach advocates asking with quiet confidence based on the assumption that some people will say no, and that's perfectly acceptable. Their rejection doesn't diminish the value of your request. It merely indicates they're not the right fit for what you're offering. This mental reframing transforms rejection from a verdict on your worth into a filtering mechanism that identifies who recognizes value and who doesn't. This expectation also protects you from the emotional manipulation that many employ. When someone acts offended by your request or attempts to make you feel inadequate for having standards, you remain unshaken. You anticipated this reaction as one possibility among many rather than as a devastating outcome to be avoided at all costs. The second strategic principle goes even further. It suggests occasionally rejecting others to build your authority and value. This isn't about cruelty or arbitrary power plays. It's about recognizing a fundamental truth about human psychology. When everyone can have your time, attention, and approval, these become essentially worthless. When you're selective about access, that access becomes inherently more precious. Consider how this operates in every domain of value. Exclusive restaurants maintain their desirability precisely because they don't serve everyone who wants a table. Premium brands remain premium because they're not accessible to everyone. The same principle applies to your personal and professional presence. When you occasionally say no to requests, your yes becomes substantially more meaningful. When you're selective about opportunities, people assume the ones you accept must be especially valuable. This selective approach doesn't require becoming aloof or distant. It simply means establishing clear standards for what deserves your energy and maintaining those boundaries consistently. Drop. Standards create value in the comments. If you've noticed how being selective about where you invest your time and attention has paradoxically increased others' desire for both. This selectivity principle operates throughout our society in ways that reveal profound truths about human psychology. Look at exclusive restaurants that maintain month-long waiting lists, private clubs with rigorous membership requirements, or limited edition products that sell out in minutes. What makes them so desirable? Precisely the fact that they're not available to everyone. Their value is inextricably linked to their selectivity. The revelation is that this same psychological mechanism applies directly to people. When you make yourself universally available, when your time, attention, and validation are freely given to anyone who asks, these precious commodities inevitably become devalued. But when you occasionally exercise the power of no, your yes transforms into something genuinely meaningful. This isn't manipulation, it's a recognition of how value perception operates in human cognition. Your selective approval becomes a symbol of genuine discernment rather than automatic acceptance. People intuitively understand the difference between validation that's earned through meeting actual standards versus validation that's dispensed indiscriminately. The first carries weight, the second feels essentially worthless. The third Machiavellian principle takes this framework further. Display boldness in the face of potential rejection. Never hide from it. Face it directly by making the big ask, taking the calculated risk, or speaking the difficult truth that others fear voicing. This approach creates a magnetic quality that draws others to you precisely because such courage is extraordinarily rare. In a landscape dominated by caution and conformity, the person willing to risk rejection automatically stands out. This distinctiveness isn't just noticeable, it's compelling. Humans are naturally drawn to those who demonstrate the courage we wish we possessed ourselves. We're fascinated by individuals who seem liberated from the fears that constrain our own choices and expressions. This boldness isn't reckless or impulsive. It's calculated. It's based on clear-eyed assessment of both potential gains and potential losses. The breakthrough insight is recognizing that the worst possible outcome of rejection is rarely as devastating as your imagination suggests, while the potential upside of boldness often exceeds your expectations. The transformative journey begins when you realize bold people consistently access opportunities that cautious individuals never even see. They get invited to bigger tables precisely because they speak up confidently at smaller ones. They secure better deals specifically because they're willing to walk away from mediocre ones. They attract stronger allies precisely because they're not afraid to challenge complacent enemies. This creates a virtuous cycle where boldness generates opportunities that further reinforce boldness. Each successful risk-taking experience provides evidence that rejection isn't fatal, while each new opportunity accessed through courage provides incentive for continued boldness. The gap between the bold and the cautious widens exponentially over time, creating fundamentally different life trajectories. The most profound revelation in this mindset shift is understanding that boldness isn't an innate personality trait. It's a cultivated skill developed through systematic exposure to rejection. Each time you face potential rejection and survive, your capacity for boldness expands. Let's examine how these principles culminate in perhaps the most powerful reframe of all, controlling the narrative around rejection itself. Write, "Boldness creates destiny" in the comments. If you've experienced how taking calculated risks despite potential rejection has opened doors that playing it safe never could. The fourth and perhaps most powerful Machiavellian principle is frame control, the revolutionary insight that rejection reflects the rejecter, not you. When someone dismisses your idea, declines your offer, or rejects your approach, they aren't proving you're inadequate. They're revealing they don't recognize value when it presents itself. They're demonstrating their limitations, not yours. Your intrinsic worth isn't determined by others' ability to perceive it. This reframe isn't about arrogance or delusion. It's about maintaining an accurate perspective on the rejection dynamic. Think about it logically. The person rejecting you doesn't know you completely. They don't understand your full potential. They don't see your complete vision. They're making judgments based on remarkably limited information filtered through their own biases, fears, and constraints. When an investor rejects your business concept, they're demonstrating their bounded imagination for future markets, not the validity of your insight. When someone dismisses your romantic interest, they're revealing their inability to recognize what you bring to relationships, not your inherent desirability. When a publisher rejects your manuscript, they're showcasing their limited market vision, not your talent as a writer. The revelation in this mindset transformation is recognizing that rejection says infinitely more about the rejecter than it does about you. Their response emerges from their unique combination of past experiences, present fears, personal biases, and limited vision, none of which have anything to do with your actual worth or potential. This perspective completely transforms how rejection feels on a visceral level. Instead of feeling diminished by someone's rejection, you feel a touch of sympathy for their limitation. Instead of feeling like you failed in some fundamental way, you recognize they've missed an opportunity that others will see. Instead of questioning your inherent worth, you question their judgment and discernment. Think about history's most stunning rejection misjudgments. Publishers who rejected Harry Potter, record labels that dismissed the Beatles, investors who passed on opportunities that later generated billions. Were these rejections accurate assessments of value or spectacular failures of vision by people who couldn't recognize what was right in front of them? When you maintain control of this frame, rejection becomes merely feedback about the rejecter, not about you. It reveals who possesses vision and who doesn't. It shows who can recognize opportunity and who remains blind to it. It identifies who deserves access to what you're offering and who lacks the discernment to value it appropriately. This framework leads to Machiavelli's ultimate lesson about rejection. The one who fears no rejection cannot be controlled. This represents the pinnacle of personal freedom. While others organize their entire existence around avoiding potential rejection, fearless individuals operate from an entirely different reality. They speak their authentic truth because they're not afraid of disagreement. They pursue ambitious goals relentlessly because they're not devastated by setbacks. They assume leadership positions because criticism doesn't paralyze them. They ask directly for what they want because hearing no doesn't shatter their confidence. This liberation creates a profound difference in how life unfolds. When you're trapped by rejection fear, every decision passes through the filter of what will prevent rejection. When you're free from this concern, your decisions flow from what will create the best outcome, an entirely different framework that generates dramatically different results. Type frame mastery achieved in the comments if you've experienced how controlling the interpretation of rejection has transformed it from a source of pain into a source of clarity in your life. The journey from rejection fear to rejection mastery doesn't happen overnight. Like any profound transformation, it unfolds through consistent practice rather than momentary insight. What you've discovered today isn't just theory. It's a framework for liberation that Machiavelli understood centuries ago and that the most powerful people in our world apply instinctively. Most viewers will never implement what they've learned today. They'll nod along with these principles, then immediately return to their rejection avoidant patterns, organizing their lives around preventing the very experiences that would strengthen them. But I sense you're different. You recognize that rejection isn't your enemy, but potentially your greatest asset when approached with the right mindset. If this perspective shift has illuminated something valuable for you, take a moment to support the channel with a like. It's a small action that helps these ideas reach others who might be trapped in the same rejection prison you're now breaking free from. I'm genuinely curious about which of these principles resonated most deeply with you. Drop "rejection mastered" in the comments if you've committed to transforming your relationship with rejection using these Machiavellian insights. Your comment creates a community of others on this same path towards psychological freedom. For those ready to continue this journey of personal sovereignty, there's a video right here that explores how to apply these same principles specifically in high-stakes negotiations and leadership scenarios. Click through if you're ready to see how rejection mastery translates directly into tangible influence in professional contexts. Remember, the world is full of opportunities, but they're all guarded by the possibility of rejection. Most people see that guard and turn away. You now know the secret. That guard only has power over those who fear it. Walk through rejection like it isn't even there, and watch as the world opens up to you in ways you never imagined possible.